Good morning, everybody. My name is Ash. Hello from Wollongong Beach. Morning coffee. Beautiful. I hope you've got a beverage as well. Coffee, wine, or beer. Probably a wine in the States about now. Done my push-ups. I've had my coffee. Today's webinar, all about risk management. And a topic near and dear to my heart as I think about all the boards and projects I've done around the world and how poorly risk management is done. And when you ask folks, hey, are you guys doing risk management, and is it proactive? What's it like? And they go, yeah, and they talk it all up. You say, oh, can I have a look? And then, well, we're in the middle of updating, and I find the same on the board meetings. Done board meetings in quite a few countries, and it should be on the agenda items, and you get to it, and then there's no log, and we talk about it at a high level, and you certainly can't drill down through the company and certainly can't do it live. So on this webinar, I'm going to talk about some best practices and then actually show you how to bring it alive and make it interactive inside the company, including cascading the risks in a real easy way. And it should change forever how you think about doing it. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so there's the slides and then the invitation that went out, important, who should own it, and then we'll really get into how to bring it alive and make it interactive and real instead of something we're just paying lip service to and pretending we're doing. Okay, so let's have a look at why is it important before who. So why is it important? So I was looking for that sort of one simple sentence crafted yesterday. So why is it important? Well, we really want to be proactive to prevent bad things from happening. And if you think about in the aviation industry, they proactively manage risks across these 10 categories. And by having the categories laid out, it's encouraging the organization to actually give attention to it, think about it, identify potential risks, brainstorm, write them down, assign ownership, and follow up. That's the theory, and as I said earlier, harder done in practice, and we'll see how to do it on this webinar. So we really want to prevent bad things from happening. And in terms of who should take responsibility, I think we always think about directors, the buck stops with directors, and there's director liability risk, director liability insurance, and also company officers, right? So we really think about it from a regulatory point of view, and also the professional roles or expert roles inside the company, and then the external advisors. So we've all heard of, the Enron saga of the auditors getting sued, and then eventually that dissolving Arthur Andersen back in the 90s. So we think about it in terms of regulatory, but I think also it's worth thinking about it just from an ethical point of view. So it doesn't matter what leadership role you're in, whether it's internally focused or externally focused, if you proactively embrace risk management and make it part of your day-to-day life, then you're going to benefit all stakeholders. And by that, I mean not only the shareholders, also customers, suppliers, partners, and the employees. We're all going to be better off if we really embrace risk management and make it alive and interactive and real, and not something we're just talking about or doing because of some sort of regulatory requirements. And I'll give you an example. In most countries, in public companies, you have to issue your public statements in most Western countries. And in Australia, I think it's an annual thing. And we're setting up a public company in Oz recently on stratapp. And we had the COO and maybe eight others in for a workshop. And in preparation to demonstrate the functionality, I went to their website, took their public statement on risks, the last one, dropped all those risks into stratapp, took me 5 minutes, assigned ownership based on what I could determine from the org chart, and then demonstrated that in the meeting. And then what was interesting is the management team, and they're all fairly senior guys and girls, were saying, yeah, these are really good. Where did you get those from? And I'm like, well, they're your risks. And I got them off the internet. And that's what you're telling the public and shareholders, that you're managing these risks. So you can see that disconnect. So even big companies that might have a chief risk officer role and a risk committee from the board, and then internal people looking after risk management, often under the CFO, even those big companies, there still ends up this great divide between the paperwork process of satisfying compliance and actually bringing that alive inside the company. And as soon as you go a few layers down, most of those people wouldn't even know what the risks are or even the categories that we're trying to focus on as an organization. I'll also talk about how to manage categories with the sort of tech approach to risk management when we're bringing it alive and interactive. I'll cover that too. Okay, so that's who. And then if you took looking at who, there's different frameworks worldwide. So I'll show you a few. I'll go Australia, UK, and I'll show you some things from the US. So, but before then, let's have another sip of coffee. Just love coffee. Okay, so this is the Governance Institute of Australia, and you can see they're proposing, you look at it in two frameworks. So one is a strategic long-term view, and another is an operational short-term view. And the strategic setting the framework, and the short-term making sure you're tracking and measuring the status and tolerance of risk. And they divide responsibility between board and management. The board is there to make sure there is a framework, and the management is there to design and to implement the framework. And the board should be making sure that's taking place. I personally think, particularly for small business and SMBs up to say 5,000 employees, I really think the board should be not just asking what the framework is and evidence of it being implemented. The board should actually be going through the risks and taking interest in them, and particularly looking at the ones that could have the most impact on the company or are lacking mitigations where they should have them. So, you know, I think in smaller companies, you should be going way beyond that sort of governance framework. The UK has this orange handbook. I didn't have time to figure out why it's orange. By the way, this presentation and all these links, I'll put inside the link to this video, so including the deck, so you'll be able to go through the deck and these links at your own pace, so no need to write anything down. And this first slide is just talking about the cycle of making sure you've got a flow of identifying, tracking, reporting on, assigning, etc. risks. So you'll see many diagrams. If you Google risk management framework on Google Images, you'll see many different versions of this, and you'll even see some cases by industry, including aviation that I mentioned before. So yeah, it's a diagram, but basically you should be doing it, should be continuous activity and with a process. And then in the same handbook, they introduced this concept of lines of defense and separating sort of board, audit committee, management, and then day-to-day and who's doing what. So you'll see this sort of 3 lines of defense, fairly consistent worldwide in this discipline of risk management. And I'm not going to spend long on theory, but the first line is in layman's terms, is it's actually happening. So there's a process for identifying, tracking, engaging on, etc. the risks. And the second line of defense is there's functions that are overseeing it and maybe have some specialized training and certainly responsibilities within the organization to be going through and updating and checking and following through on risks. And then the third line of defense is some sort of independent audit process. So for bigger companies, there'll be external audit involved, and you may also have ISO standards you're trying to audit against, for example. And in smaller companies, that'll typically just cascade through the finance function, and it'll be an audit process that you do every 6 months or 12 months on the company. So that's pretty standard. You'll see the same thing here on this. This is KPMG's framework for private equity firms. It's US centric. So this is their recommendation for firms that are investing in companies, how to manage the risk across the portfolio in each company. So across the portfolio. And here they're introducing this concept of categories. So a little bit like the 10 categories I showed you before for aviation, KPMG is saying, look, these are the top 6 categories to be managing in today's climate. And they're, again, bottom left is the continuous process. And then on the right, it's consulting. I'm ex-Accenture, so I can make fun of it. I really love KPMG, Accenture, Deloitte, a lot of respect for them, and the niche strategy firms as well, of course. So, so here's a complicated diagram. At the end of the day, saying there's 3 lines of defense, 1, 2, 3, and you allocate out a focus and responsibilities within that framework. So again, there's good articles below these frameworks, which I'll include in the links. Remember Michael Porter's 5 forces. I think it's also a great framework for categorizing, tracking, or at least getting a room full of folks to think about where the risks are in a company. So this is the 5 forces competitive 5 forces model, talking about competition. So the dynamics of competition. And if you were to say, have a look at the buy side, so these are your customers, and what are the risks associated with these aspects of your buyers? You can see this model also stimulates thought around risks that may be applicable from a competitive or some other sense for your company. So I think this is a good model to go back to as well. There's the link on that in the deck. You would have seen I wrote this article just last year, I think, was talking about, risk management gets a bit hard because there's no way to do it logistically and admin wise. So we tend not to do it, as I mentioned earlier. And then we just lump it on the CFO and we say, hey, you're responsible for this. And it's really with that compliance ticker box mindset, I think a lot of us fall into. And in this article, I talk about the components of risk management. So 10 key components. And then of course, against those, we want to track mitigations on each risk. So each risk, you should be identifying these 10 components for the risk and then the mitigations for the risk. So again, I'm going to show you shortly how to do that in a real easy way with software that's new and it's fresh without going to a single-use app or another place to do it. So I did run a venture capital fund where we were really disciplined on tracking risks for the fund. We weren't so good at doing it by company because we didn't have tech or software like what I'm going to show you. But we did use static documents and a log, and it was very tedious in the sense of trying to keep an eye on what's already been closed and what's emerged since the last meeting, sort of that time frame perspective, and then trying to sort and reorder it. So yeah, and even if you do get really good at setting that up in a more sophisticated Google Sheet or maybe Smart Sheets or something like that, you then still lose the ability to drill down and see what's happening. And I think the next generation of risk management is to be able to drill down as a board or a management team or a small company owner with key offsiders inside the company. You should be able to just look through and drill down to see what's happening on the risk and get involved in it. And if you can do that, all of a sudden risk management becomes useful, in my opinion, compared to the norm I've seen worldwide across all 4 types of companies, right? So I've seen it's not done well in startups, small business, mid-market, and corporates for the reasons I talked to earlier. So another sip of coffee. Racing through the theory here to get to the practical, typical Ash. So I'll include the reading. You can go to town on that in your own time. And of course, we'll do some Q&A at the end of this. Okay, so name of the game, bring it alive, make it alive and interactive. So this is just a screenshot. I'm going to tree, so I'll just click on that. So this example, this company's got a goal and there's the sub goals. And at any point in the tree, as you've seen before, you can open it up and get involved in what's happening. The tree is alive and interactive. Okay, so that's not the focus of this webinar. And let me just stop my video as I show you a couple of things on this. So I'll close out of the card and then I'll go to the risk management page. Now at the moment that's under the workspace, and based on your feedback, we're going to move that up to the primary nav. I think it's going to sit there. And this nav is changing to a left-hand nav, so you won't have so many tabs to look at when you're on a page. So that'll be live at the end of May, which is pretty exciting. So here we are on the risk page, and you can see we're looking at a period of the last 90 days, anything that's been created or edited in the last 90 days. And on the left, we've got our filtering. But before we have a look at the filters, let's just have a look at what we can see in one glance here. So we can see we've got 7 risks we're tracking at the moment. And you can see the status of each risk at a glance. So this one here, we need to be doing something about. And you can see the probability impact. So I talked about those 10 components. So, status, title, owner, probability impact are the main ones. and there's 10 all up. And then if you open up the risks, then you want to get into mitigations, which we'll do in a moment. So the other thing you can do in stratapp, as you guys know, is create your own org design. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 employees, 500 or 5,000, this is really powerful. So if I scroll down the filter here, you'll see yesterday, I just quickly, so we already had geography and functions and market verticals. You can see here, I just added a category under horizontals for risk management. And I put in categories that we want to focus on in this example company. Now you can do this tailored to your situation. And this will give a way that you can filter all the risks you want to look at and also stimulate thinking, a bit like the aviation example I said before. So in aviation, we would have those 10 categories I showed you before. What were they? Runway safety, wildlife, turbulence, volcanic ash, et cetera, et cetera. So we would have those categories down the left. And then when we're creating a risk inside the app, we would then use those risk categories as part of the org design attributes, right? So you can see here, this one around regulatory approval, in this case, is gone under the compliance. And there I've included the KPMG framework. So, and you could choose more than one. So it's related to compliance. And you might say, hey, it's really, really important for operations for us to be able to build that factory near the marina. Again, we've got an owner, we've got security levels. So do we want this risk to be visible in the organization? So if, for example, if you're tracking cash flow risks around for the company or a project or something like that, you might have some of those things marked as confidential, so only the members can participate and see them. Okay, so let me just jump out of there. I'm going to move the Zoom camera around as I go. So here we are we're back on the risk page, and I can collapse these filters. So I've shown you that. So the next thing you want to be able to do then is to make it alive and interactive. So first of all, imagine you're the owner of the company, or you're on the board or the risk committee. So instead of just looking at a static log, you can come into any of these and go, well, hang on a minute, what's actually going on? So this one here, owned by Oscar, let's open that up. And in one click, we can see there's conversations going on, and we could see if there's been any meetings taking place. We could open that and go through the meeting notes. And here we've got 4 mitigations against this risk. So the risk is cheaper seafood alternatives coming from China, and that could impact our ability to sell seafood into Asia in this example. And our strategy as a company to mitigate that risk is we want to do premium brand, ocean to plate tracking. We're going to go for organic branding and genuine certification. And by building that processing plant, we want to cut some costs out of the supply chain. So even though we're premium brand, we want it to be price competitive. So this is how we're going to counter this risk of seafood from China. We're going to see, look, it's probably going to happen, medium probability, but we think the impact's going to be medium because of our mitigations. And if a mitigation is no longer relevant, then we can close it and go back to it later. And then, these are the current 3 we're managing. And then you can do everything here on this one card. So you can, you might add an idea for someone to give thought to. So you can say, we could use the MSA organic standards for this. And so that's my idea. And now that becomes a card that people can collaborate on, executing that idea, linked to this risk, which is linked to this strategic goal of our strategy tree, which I showed you before. You could add tasks, you could add whole project workboards below here. Everything is alive and interactive at your fingertips. And I think this is the way to connect, the compliance obligation on you is just to write them down and assign an owner and track some of these dynamics, right? But to go way beyond that and make it real and connect sort of what you're telling the public or what you're telling the board to internally inside the company is this live and interactive experience. And, here we're asking questions, ideas, we can make decisions, we can request a decision. So, at Marty, shall we X, Y, Z, right? propose a question there, and then he's going to get that through as a decision request and respond. So you've got the decisions and approvals, everything's at your fingertips in one place. No end user training, work straight out of the box, pre-configured for you, nothing to do, just turn it on and start tracking risks. So I've shown you this is the dashboard. You can filter by time, you can drill down on what you're interested in. So if we undo all these categories and just say, hey, show me the compliance risks and anything to do with, say, market, we drill that down, you say, okay, we've got 3, right? Including the standards one we looked at before. And this one here was compliance, wasn't it? Building near the marina. So you can quickly go to what you're interested in. You can also filter down by context. So show me stuff that's more strategic or objectives related. You've got all of that. You can see also you can add risk to projects, tasks, anything. You can add risk to risk. We just kept that in case you want to go to town. So let's have a look at that also, just how easy it is to add a risk to something inside the app. So let's say you're working on the strategy tree and you say, well, launch this online seafood brand. If I come here and I want to just see all the related content, so the main ones appear on that nav. We go here, we've already got some risks. Yeah, we already do, right? So if I wanted to add another risk, I just click here and that would hang off here below the tree. Or I could go to this local plus button here and add anything I want, including ideas, running a challenge, or a risk here. So what this means is wherever you are in the app, doesn't matter if you're just doing a task or a project, you can add a risk to it, which will then be captured and displayed up over on this risk page. So the organization captures everything as it goes, including inside conversations, which folks find fascinating. So I can come over here and actually identify a risk by just tagging it here, online seafood van, and let's say low priced seafood from, let's do Vietnam, another competitive player. So now this risk card is part of our social conversation here. So someone say, hey, are you sure? Come and ask me a question. And I'd get, notifications saying so-and-so's asked you, responded to your post on this card. And then I'd come in here and I'd see it's a question, or I'd see that on my notifications. And so we're having a conversation here around this risk that I've identified, which belongs to this strategic goal. And again, that'll appear now on our risk page, which I'll show you in a moment. But in one click, I can open that guy up and you can see now it's got its own workspace and we can do the same collaboration I said before, right? So mitigations, assign ownership, meetings, links, files, everything in one place. So this is really bringing it alive inside the organization and nothing gets missed. So what's it? Low price seafood from Vietnam. Let's go over to the risk page. There it is. It's live sync, so you don't have to refresh the page. It's appeared, got an owner, and now it's being managed in the context of all the risks that we're managing. And of course, I can filter and say, just show me stuff that's urgent for now. And that's going to filter down to our marina risk. So there you go. That's it's as easy as that. And if you do this, you'll just find risk management will become part of your day-to-day. It'll become part of your conversations inside the app socially. And when you're reviewing a project, you can go to the workboard page and just see all the risks related to that project. So project boards inside stratapp, super easy. You can also see all the ideas hanging off a project. And you can see the risks under the strategy tree. And then when you go to those board meetings or any review process you've got, you're not just looking at a log of a Google sheet or some sort of static document. It's you've got the dashboard. You can filter it by time. You can filter it by what you're interested in. And then in one click, you're into that workspace and you can see everything taking place on that risk inside the company. So it goes way beyond compliance. It removes all the admin and it makes it really easy for whoever's responsible for risk management, whether you're the owner of a small company or you're in that CFO seat getting lumped with the gig, which tends to happen once there's sort of 200 employees or more. it all sort of gets lumped to the CFO, as do a lot of other things. And yeah, so this makes the life for the CFO easier, but also it really means you go from box ticking and compliance to actually it's alive and interactive and real, inside the company. So good luck with that. I'd love your feedback, and any questions, hit us up and we'll get back to you quickly. And of course, we've got a consulting and coaching team that can help you set up these frameworks if you need it. It's really easy out of the box, right? The app's pre-configured, and it's priced at a point where you can afford to include everyone without having to think about budget, because the pricing is I'm not allowed to say low, right? But the pricing is we've taken price off the table. Let's say that. So good luck, and thanks very much, and wish you a great day.